Hi folks, we're Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the phenomenon, it's a modern phenomenon of zombie workers. And there's been articles written about it, they've called it the living dead of the office and all this sort of thing. But the number of workers or employees, because they're not really working, the number of employees, the number of jobs that are being created or positions and situations created for doing nothing, achieving nothing, building nothing, creating nothing. And this is delivered to the Western economies, the hitherto capitalist economies, has delivered this monumental workforce, huge, numerous to the nth degree, of these people that do nothing. They just create, it's an artificially created economy, an artificially created sort of sector of the economy. But this has got to a point now where these invented jobs outnumber actual jobs, outnumber productive jobs. So just a few sort of things to give you, food for thought here. The number of people employed at NGOs handsomely exceeds the number of people employed in the manufacturing industry. Now, I'm going to jump around a bit to some different countries here, but they're all Western first world countries. And the amount of people employed in, say, human resources exceeds the total number of people employed in agriculture, in the farms. The number of law enforcement authorities involved with monitoring online mean tweets and so on, which disproportionately involve chasing down straight white males or straight white people that say disagree with mass migration or something like that. Vastly exceeds the amount of people or the amount of law enforcement authorities that are actually chasing real criminals, murderers or something. So these are the sorts of things. So how can that be happening? Surely crime is you have more police chasing down actual crime. But there's now a situation where, certainly in my assessment at least, the role of law enforcement authorities is ideological now. It's not to chase the criminals, it's to deal with people who oppose the globalist ideology, and they are now the real criminals. They are the far right. And you can see this by, as an example, the way the law enforcement authorities all across the Western world treated the Palestinian demonstrations, no matter how unruly they became, with kid gloves. Whereas, half a dozen people get together and they'll say, they're neo-Nazis, and suddenly the police have endless resources to go and chase after them and show how big and tough they are. So this is these are examples of the divide. Now, if you go into the, say into the average multinational company, and there are vast numbers of people there who appear, they don't seem to have anything to do. They're people that are involved in some sort of obscure level of compliance, making sure that other people do what they're supposed to do, the documents and the forms and so on. I've been surprised in the business that we're involved in, how when we engage in a small contract, it can be in many ways a tiny contract of work, package of work. It's maybe $25,000 or something, and these people all appear out of the woodwork, where you have to have this form signed, you have to have that, you have to have this, you have to have something else, and it's quite remarkable that they. But yet, when we want to talk to people who have the technical knowledge to give us the necessary briefings, there's no one there who can do that. They're not available, or there isn't anyone there at all, or nobody knows. But when it comes to compliance officers, they're everywhere. Also, they're people drunk on their petty sort of bureaucratic power and making these dire threats if you haven't returned this form filled out by 5 o'clock today, your contract will be cancelled and legal action will ensue. Things like what? Well, the existence of this form we didn't even know about till 5 seconds ago. Already you're making dire threats of contract cancellation. So the amount of people involved in compliance, what we find is an astonishing number of people, but there's no one there actually doing the work. When you want to talk to, again, technical people or the engineers on the ground, it's like pulling teeth trying to find people. And but we see this now sort of really all over the place. And when you look at any multinational firm, anything global is captured, any government department, then the amount of people there sort of in these departments, they don't have any work to do. There's nothing. They're not there for any reason. Whatever they do, the work they do has been invented. Some sort of strange, bizarre hybrid of compliance monitoring and some obscure indirect, and that's kind of their job. They don't really know what their job is. No one knows what their job is, but as long as they hand in some sort of report and ticks and boxes, then that's it. Now, these jobs overwhelmingly are going to minorities. The monitoring state, the compliance state, people from women and people from the third world love Indians, for example. Indians go orgasmic over these jobs, and so they're very much favoured for it. And looking at some of, say, the banks and big financial institutions, especially in the city, you sit down and have a cup of coffee in the cafes at the bottom of these buildings, and there'll be just an endless stream of brown or black people coming in and out of the building. Whereas, 20 years ago, you'd be lucky to see any brown or black people coming in and out of the building. And the amount of jobs that are the increase, especially these big protected multinationals, where they're globalist protected. So we've got these vast segments of the economy that are being protected from competition, and they're the ones, whether it be a government department, a quango, an NGO masquerading as a charity, or a multinational firm that's acting in effect as a mass migration conduit into the West. And they're all very much protected from competition. They get huge government contracts that aren't competitive in any way, and so they profit handsomely from it. And they're the places where these roles and positions can be found in vast numbers. But the point of this video is that to really indicate that these jobs are now in the majority. Productive jobs where you produce, build, or create anything at all, or even knowledge-intensive jobs where you're a manager supervising complex type organizational structures and things like that. Those jobs are very much in those types of jobs, which are really the sort of jobs you would find in a competitive market-driven economy. Those jobs are now very much, I believe, an absolute. Well, no, they're a minority, no question, but a minority, and it's increasing. I remember interview when I first sort of became a supervisor. I was interviewing job applicants. They would all have had a background. I mentioned this before, where they'd after schools and after school job. They're still students of school, but they're working at a takeout for McDonald's or something like that, or maybe a chain of grocery stores or something, and they that was what and then they'd move to something sort of a bit more. They become students, maybe they go into university, then they're applying for full-time jobs. So that was their sort of back. Now today, I challenge you to find, certainly by my experience and those I've spoken to, is that young people have never worked at a real job. They've only ever worked for an NGO, placard waving and street protesting and fighting back against Nazis and all this sort of thing, and climate and whatever. and particularly the girls. Young girls are at like 100%. That's all they've done, and it's considered sort of low and demeaning, and quite vulgar, really, to say go and work at a McDonald's when you can be out on the street placard waving and doing socially virtuous stuff about the climate or whatever. So we've got pretty much every new job being created today, with the odd exception, pretty much every new job being created is a do-nothing, bullshit, living dead job that produces, creates, builds nothing at all. And it's just there for some sort of a window dressing effect, but not to do any work. I mean, just as an example, there was a smallish manufacturing company. When I say smallish, they were probably doing, I don't know, $50 million a year or something, so they weren't tiny, but a manufacturing company, and they were doing very well and had a lot of business. They were bought out by a much larger company. Now they managed this $50 million company, including all the machinists and the workers and the dudes in the warehouse and the office staff. They got by on quite a bit less than 100 employees, probably 70 or 80, something like that. But when the bigger company bought them out, and they moved in with this multinational firm protected by government. So they moved into, they've got a lot of government contracts. They moved in, there's over 200 people. So approximately 3 times as many people are now working at this place or this branch or division than there were previously. Now we're 3 times as many people in there. So I assumed that maybe the business has doubled or tripled or something like that. But the business is roughly the same, if anything, slightly less. But let's just go. So they're doing the same amount of sales. They're moving the same amount of kit out the door, but they've got 3 times as many employees. And there's just people doing nothing there, just roaming around. But there's all these compliance officers. Again, they're all women or black or brown women. There's no, maybe a few gay guys, that sort of thing, but there's no real workers there. The proportion of straight white males has declined as a part of the overall workforce. So it's got all the signs of a globalist sort of architecturally and structured arrangement there. But there's no, productivity has gone through the floor because you've got 3 times as many people doing pretty much exactly the same amount of work as was done previously, or producing the same outcome in terms of, again, kit that's being shipped out the door. So, but this is part of a wider problem. When you've got more HR cat ladies in the overall national workforce than you do everybody who works in agriculture. When you've got more street protesters and placard wavers, paid placard wavers no less, than you do people involved in the whole manufacturing industry in the country, then you've got a problem. I mean, this is a fucking problem. When the best paid jobs on the internet job boards are jobs working for NGOs and quangos and government departments, those are the best paid jobs. When you've got a political advisor on gay lesbian affairs that's paid 3 times as much as a senior manufacturing manager in a factory, then your whole economy has a problem. The gay lesbian affairs advisor is just an ideological hack goon. Why should they be paid 3 times what the productive manufacturing manager is getting paid? That's insanity. But this is widespread across the entire economy. And when you look at the new jobs being created, other than just the lowest of the low paid jobs in a takeout food shop or something like that, once you get away from those sort of jobs, which again, people are being imported for those jobs. Slave labor is being imported. People are being put up 20 to a 1-bedroom apartment, and they're being given. They're working at these takeout food shops, and they're being brought in. Third world peasants being brought in to do this sort of work. That in terms has created an artificial economy. That's not a real job. In addition to this, you're looking at say, retail shops where, because of there's more online commerce taking place and this sort of thing, that a retail, you need to keep the retail shop open because of the brand and a presence in the place and that sort of thing. But you're not going to do a whole lot of business, and you never know when the business will come in. So they put a third world peasant in there to sort of do the basics, just so there's somebody there. And they give this person, they pay this person shit money. They're slave labor. But this sort of thing, there's a growth in those sort of jobs rather than the economy readjusting around the new commercial realities of consumer spending and consumer spending patterns. Take, for example, Elon Musk buying Twitter, and he fired 80% of the workforce, and there was an improvement in service and quality of service. So what were these many thousands of people doing? What was the why were Indian activists, anti-white, anti-Western Indian activists sort of running who created that? And increasingly we're seeing these sort of patterns play out everywhere. There's just vast workforce. There's a regional government in Australia decided to set up a special climate change council, and they managed to go from no employees to 25,000 employees in 12 months. Now, these people weren't employees employed to do work. They were being paid off ideological activists. So there's now not a worker class or a class of workers, but an ideological class. And they are gifted jobs based on ideology and based on their usefulness to the globalist system of race and gender hustling and all that sort of stuff. This is why people that organise renter mobs to run around and wave placards on the street are paid 3 to 5 times the average wage in Australia. But yet they do nothing. They're just ideological hack goons. And we saw this too in the communist societies of the Soviet Union and China and Eastern Europe and this sort of thing, that teachers teaching communist ideology, for example, were handsomely rewarded compared to people who were doing actual productive work. So that same sort of view and attitude of social control and so on is being played out in the West today. But when you look at that, when you look at these two things, which took me a bit by, I suspect it's something maybe close, but not like this, that there are more human resource cat ladies than there are people working in agriculture. What? And there and there are more of other sorts of jobs, and people working in more placard wavers and people working in manufacturing. Then you know that peak insanity has arrived, and this is a problem across the Western world, and one that's very much been created and supported and pushed by the globalist cabal. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.